Okay, so today we will be discussing the Supreme Court case Flood v. Kuhn. And basically, the first fact that we need to know is that Kurt Flood was a professional basketball player in the major leagues, a baseball player. And in 1969, Flood was traded from the St. Louis Cardinals to the Philadelphia Phillies without his consent. This was a common practice in baseball at the time, where players had little control over their team assignments due to the reserve clause, which had to do with antitrust laws, a contractual provision that bound players to their team even after their contracts had expired. Flood decided to challenge the reserve clause and took legal action against MLB and its commissioner Bowie Kuhn, arguing that the clause violated antitrust laws. Now, the issue here was whether MLB's reserve clause, which restricted player movement between teams, violated federal antitrust clause. Basically, he wanted to have control, and he wanted players to have control over where they went after their contracts had ended. And due to certain laws, due to a certain clause in the MLB, he basically didn't really have control over that, and he argued that it broke antitrust laws, right? And what he argued basically was that since the MLB was a business, and he was an employee of MLB, he should have contractual control after his contract is ended. He can choose where to go. But since it was one complete system, and the different teams weren't really recognized as different entities in that way, MLB basically had control over where they would go. Now, the court opinion basically they ruled 5-3 in favor of the respondents. So they held that the baseball's antitrust exemption established through previous rulings like the Federal Baseball Club versus National League case still applied. This exemption stated that baseball was not subjected to the Sherman Antitrust Act due to its unique status as a sport. So basically, what they were saying was that the antitrust laws do not apply in this case, or in baseball case or sports cases, because they aren't classified in a business as a business in the same way. Now, they also argued, they brought up that in basketball at that time it was the same situation and nobody was really complaining about that. The dissenting opinion, or the 3 votes, raised the constitutional question of whether the reserve clause and its impact on player movement between teams constitute anti-competitive behavior that should fall under federal antitrust regulations. So basically, they were saying that the impact on player movement would stop other people from being able to compete within the organization and outside of it, and that it should fall, since that was business-related behavior, it should fall under federal antitrust regulations and not be up to the major league people, right? And although the court won in this case, later on, this case had a big impact on whether or not how much control players would have over where they went after their contracts expired, and it led to a lot of revision in these cases where players would basically get to choose where they would go and have more negotiation power when discussing how much they would get paid based on where they are. So that's Flood v. Kuhn summarized. Thank you for listening.